Hey everyone, welcome to a impromptu press B discussion where we're going to talk about something in the news. We are going to talk about Unity and how Unity has unified game developers and not in a good way.
Yeah,
uh,
pretty much.
we'll give a quick history, but I just want to say I feel like like somebody could have learned from Wizards and Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I really feel like that. That what
Yeah.
they did with their TOS, this feels very similar. So, quick bit of history. Unity used to have a policy where the only thing that you really paid for was your subscription for the tools, and you could release your product and basically royalty free. In fact, um, John Riccitiello, ex EA CEO, who drove EA nearly into the ground when he was there, through just bad decisions. When they released the Unity version in 2015, he specifically said no royalties, no fucking around, and that's gone. So
Yeah, in fact, I remember when that happened because I mean I've been dabbling in game engines just to see what they're all about over the last 15 years, and Unity was always interesting, but I never wanted to pay money to be able to export my game to different platforms. They got rid of all of that when they switched to that subscription model, and it was a great friendly move to people like me who dabble, but also indie developers. So at the time, they were like iconic as an indie engine. Like it's wildly how popular they became very quickly when they made their engine so easy to get into, to both to play around with, but then turn into a platform for your indie games if you want to go that way.
right now, uh, I mean, background. We're talking a little bit of background here, but yeah, you talked about they went to the subscription model. On top of that, there were some concerns that they wanted to address, and they created a for those that are not familiar, a repo, or really a source code repo, but they put their terms of service up on this repo so that you could literally see the history. And then they said, as long as you don't update your tooling and you continue to release with the version X, so I think their versions were by year, like 2018 dot something, right? As long as you released under that and you use those tools, you could use that terms of service. And they quietly deleted the GitHub repo with their terms of service when this whole thing went down. So they have basically tried to erase history, as it were. So, a couple other things. I've read some things that are, basically said, is this legal to do? Can they do this? And it's a little murky, but I've seen some takes that basically say it's funny. There were these TOSs that they published, but there's an overarching terms of service that actually says, hey, we can change this anytime we want without notice. So,
And that's what I think you mentioned for Wizards tried to do with their changing to their new version of their license and going away from the OGL, I guess, to something different, where they're basically kind of rewording the terms of their agreement with people, and that affected people who use the old terms. A lot of pushback on that, and that you're right. That feels a lot like what's happening here with Unity.
and really quick, I wanted to, for those that are watching this video, Jake has been replaced by Doink, Doink the Clown.
How do you guys not know Doink the Clown? WWE's famous Doink the Clown. I'm moving, and that's why my mic sounds like crap right now, because I just finished moving and I have not got my camera set up yet. So bear with
That's
me.
fair.
You get the face of Circus Charlie fans across the globe. Doink.
Doink. All right,
He's here.
What were you gonna say, Wolf?
Well, I know we're kind of throwing the CEO of Unity under the bus, but there's a post I came across on Unity yesterday that enlightens some things a little bit. I don't know who posted this. I'm sorry, but it was apparently originally on Reddit. So the statement is that John Riccitiello is not single-handedly responsible for this, as we would claim. In 2020, Unity went public, and a bunch of shitheads bought their way onto Unity's board of directors.
Oh, wow.
Ultimately, the CEO works for the board, so when these new bosses tell him to do something self-destructive, he does it. So this might explain why he sold his shares, because he was invested in the company and then got this news and was like, well, I got to get out of this before it goes bad.
So to be clear though,
So
he didn't sell all his shares. He only he did sell some. I think it was 2,000 shares, but somebody that high up at the company has a lot more. But you're right. It is odd that him and a few other people over at Unity did shed some of their shares before dropping this bomb, but it wasn't all of it.
yeah. So there's 3 people listed in this post: Tomer Barzeev, Roloff Botha, and Egon Durbin. So I'm gonna read this word for word because that's just how this is going. So whoever wrote this, thank you. I'm sorry I can't credit you for right here, but remember Iron Source, that dog shit monetization company that absolutely everyone in the industry dumped and was circling the drain until Unity bought them for $4.4 billion? Tomer Barzeev is the founder of Iron Source, and following the merger, he became Unity's 3rd president, along with John and Mark. These are the assholes who sold a package of malware under the guise of monetization software, and ultimately the root cause of this install tax. Given Iron Source's history of malware, I feel that it is safe to say that the Unity runtime will likely start getting flagged by antivirus programs and casually request admin rights during installation.
Wow.
How Unity got infected with Iron Source is that Sequoia Capital and Silver Lake pledged to invest $1 billion into Unity if the deal went through. The math doesn't really add up for Unity to trade $4.4 billion to buy a plague blanket of a company, only to receive $1 billion in return, especially when a rival mobile monetization company offered to pay Unity $17 billion if they called off the Iron Source deal and merged with them instead. Unless that $1 billion was for the sake of C-suite bonuses, in which case all of this makes perfect sense. So,
wow,
it sounds like the board of directors are really just lining their pockets at the expense of game developers and the company as a whole.
So the thing is, though, so here's why, though, right? Because companies got to make money, right? Nobody's in
Sure.
this game to be benevolent, charity, right? They got to make their cash. And I think when Unity first announced their pretty radical shift to being so transparent originally and being so welcoming to the indie scene and for people to hop on board game development, that over the years you had other players enter the system, right? You had Unreal, and then Unreal brought in, honestly, also an amazing engine, very easy to use, and had really generous terms for people to use it. You could use Unity's engine for free. You only had to start paying money when you hit a certain threshold of revenue, which, let's be real, most people don't hit, whatever that threshold
Sure.
is. So after Unreal came in with their basically free engine for developers, I think at that point you saw a shift of a lot of people looking at not just Unreal as the engine used for indie development, but also looking at Unreal, and they probably lost some users there. So at some point they had to look at other ways to make money. And I know Unity, a big source of revenue for them is ads. They have an ad kit that you install in your game, and and they get a lot of money from that. So this seems to me just it's all the money, and it always is. So I think the fact is they're losing money to companies like Unreal. They see game developments both small but also large, like games like Fall Guys, Valheim, Genshin Impact. I think is also on Unity. Those
Phasmo.
games are using Phasmo, so they're all using Unity and sold millions of copies, or quite a number. I mean, not millions, but hundreds of thousands of copies. And what did Unity get from those? Not a whole lot, at least from their point of view. So they're just trying to get money out of the big success stories that use Unity. But by doing this install based fee is really just hurting everybody besides the big players, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah,
Well,
I saw one take. Sorry, Wolf. I saw one take where I don't remember who the developer was, but basically said, I made a game. It actually did very well, but it was one of these like $1.50 or whatever games, right? And the person's like, yeah, I made like $240,000. That's awesome. Congratulations. I'm glad you made your 240. But he looked at the uh at the terms, and he basically said if the installs to this point were the case, I would be on the hook for $500,000. Like the way that it worked out, the way that his take was, because obviously he also had to put it on a distribution source like Steam or something else which takes their cut, right? And so he's still getting pennies on the dollar, as it were, right? And so having to pay out 20 cents, and you can change that by opting in to the uber expensive subscription. Okay, now we're talking, a couple pennies per install instead of 20, but still at that point you've taken somebody that took their life work, made 200, I mean, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but $240,000, $250,000 over how long this person's, developed it and then sold it, that's not actually a lot of money, right? And then the other thing is while they have backed off on a few of the things, they still haven't backed off on the lifetime installs. So this isn't this is going into effect January 1. We're going to count from January 1. This is going into effect of, we're counting all of your installs, and now we're doing a monthly delta, right? Based on all of your installs back to 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? So, yeah, and then we should talk about this. I'm going to bring it up, and maybe this is the right time, but, they basically, they came out with a trust me bro statement. We have a way to validate first installs, because at that point they're like, okay, wait, we'll back off. We'll not do every install. We'll do first installs. Okay, cool. That sounds great. But this is a world of technology. Rust actually, the guy that developed Rust talked about how there is a application already developed that resets your hardware ID for every install of Rust if you want. Like if you want to hack the system, you can reset your hardware ID every single time. Good luck, Unity. Good luck proving that that's not.
Well,
yeah.
And here's the thing. They're not just going to outright do it, right? They're happy to work with developers if they suspect fraud is involved.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, like Unity, a lot of developers have trouble getting them to respond on their own forums with problems.
Right.
So when it comes to developers reaching out and saying, hey, we think there's fraud involved. This is too much money coming from us to you. Let's fix this. What does it benefit Unity to put manpower, spend money on losing money? Right?
Yeah.
And what's to stop them from fudging the numbers then and being like, I don't know, we only found that 2% of your installs were fake instead of 40 or 50%.
Right.
So you owe us all this money. Really?
Yeah.
They have a horse in this race,
It's
they have
worst.
12 of them.
It's the worst of trust me, bro. It is the worst of trust me, bro, right? Like, you know what? If you're going to put a fee on it, put a fee on the purchase, right? Have Steam give you numbers, okay? This sold X amount of times. Not fucking installs.
In a world of piracy where how easy it is to get games cracked, and it's been like this for decades or more, right? It makes no sense. And to hear them say, oh, we have proprietary software to track this crap. You're right. This is the worst kind of trust me, bro. You want to hear from somebody like Unity. Do you trust Unity after this? This change of stance? Why would we trust you going forward? It makes
trust us
zero
because
sense.
we've proven that you can't.
Yeah, right? Like it's insane.
I won't lie to you. All of a sudden, Pinocchio's nose just grows, right? So,
and like if they wanted to make money, there's other options. Like you made a good example. They could have just gotten numbers from Steam for purchases. That makes sense to me. Or they could have done something like increase the subscription fee per month. That's a thing. Or do what Unreal does, where if you develop a software with Unity and it makes X amount of money, then you got to pay up. That's what Unity or Unreal does. That always felt fair to me. So if you have a Genshin Impact or you have a Phasmo that makes hundreds of thousands of dollars, then you can get a cut that way. That seems fair to me. But to go after people like, like Valheim. Well, maybe not Valheim, but there's lots of Unity games that have a couple thousands of sales, maybe made 10 grand if they're lucky. But those games, if they get pirated or if they get, a surge, it makes no sense to me. Or like the one developer who said a lot of indie developers are taking the Game Pass deal where they put their heart and soul into the game.
Yep.
It probably won't sell a very good high number of copies on Steam, so they give it to Microsoft. They get a lump sum payment, and then it's installed that way. Those people could potentially be very hurt by this. And I know
Sure.
Unity has said now ultimately, oh, you wouldn't pay for those install fees. Microsoft and Nintendo would pay those fees, or Sony would pay those fees.
Which is
Did they-
absolutely absurd because they're not
Yeah.
signing any sort of contract with Unity, right? That's
Right,
not
yeah.
enforceable.
Right. And on top of that, like, and I know that they've backed off on things like free and charity, but once again, we're stuck in this trust me, bro, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to go get a bill that has like, that my free game that you messed up, right? Because Unity never messes up. But my free game that you decided wasn't free, all of a sudden you send me a bill, and my option is to take you to court, or your option is to take me to court, and you're an organization and I'm an indie developer. Who's going to win? Right?
Who has the resources to even bother with a trial, right?
Yeah. And
So-
I don't think game engines should be free. I think that these companies should make money. Unity should make money. Unreal should make money. I think that these have value.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say,
But-
Wolf?
Yeah, and they do make money, right? And they can make money. Sorry, Wolf. Like Unreal has a good model where it's like it's free to get in, to figure it out, to learn it, to use it, and then if you make something great and successful with it, then you pay. That seems the best way that helps the average person who wants to learn, but also helps companies like Epic and Unreal to make their money off an engine. I think that's a great way of doing it. It must be working well for Unreal because Unreal is one of the most popular, widely used engines out there, just like Unity is. Honestly, it's just such a weird change.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Wolf?
Here's the thing. Let's go back to about 13 years ago when I was going to Art Institute for Game Design. They had us learning both Unity and Unreal under different experiences, right? Like the level design class was using Unreal, I believe. And that's because it was literally you were designing levels for, I believe, maybe Unreal. Like
Unreal Tournament, probably.
the shooter, right?
Yeah.
So it was a level design class that you were designing for that. And I think as an education experience, like they got the software cheaper, but I don't think there was a free tier for Unreal at the time.
Right.
I think it was like the campus had some sort of deal with Epic to have access to it. For those other classes where we had to have access to it at home, it was really easy to sign up with Unity to use it for free with an educational email address. So that's what we used at home. So it was, two-pronged attack, but it was also good to know multiple engines was kind of the idea. So Unity was great for people learning because it was free, accessible,
Sure.
and honestly, using Unity versus Unreal was kind of like using 3D Studio Max versus using Maya. Like, obviously, Maya is way more powerful, but it costs a lot more money. It's a lot more resource heavy. 3D Studio Max was really way cheaper to access, and like a little easier to learn up front. So if you're familiar with the animation softwares, that's the difference there.
Yeah.
It's so Unity. I was learning Unity once upon a time, and then as time's gone on, it's been cool to see Unity sort of grow and flourish. And they really hit their stride, I want to say around like 20, kind of when Riccatello joined Unity, weirdly enough. Maybe just a little before, but that's when they really started to take off and gain a lot of traction. And, engines like Godot and Game Maker and Click Team Fusion, I think.
Yeah.
These were all like they were around. They didn't have the traction that these, Unity Unreal did, but they were gaining ground, especially Godot. I've seen, Godot make huge advances over the last 15 years. It's wild. and we'll talk about Godot a little bit in just a few minutes, but Unity has had this thing where they started making it accessible for free, and then the more people you wanted, the more features you wanted access to, and it wasn't like huge features, it was more like direct support from their company, things like that. You'd pay more, and it made sense for a while, and then something major happened that I think really screwed Unity. Epic made money hand over fist with Fortnite. They
Right.
started making decent money with their Epic Game Store. So instead of like just wallowing in their greed, they were like, let's reinvest this. So they made Unreal way more accessible. They made it they offered a free tier. They made it cheaper for small studios. And not only that, but with Epic Game Store, if you make sales on their store, they don't charge you the additional fee. So if the game is made with Unreal, they don't charge you 18%. I think they only charge you 12% when you release on their store. And then, they have a 5% royalty fee for any sales, any revenue directly from the game. And if you're selling on Epic Game Store, they're like, well, we're already taking 12% from you from our store, so we're not going to take more from you.
Yeah.
So they give you sort of a revenue rebate for releasing on their store with their engine. And then they're like, but we're also not going to double dip you. And then Unity comes out with this, like, how they're not fucking you? Yeah, we are. Like, you're just chasing off your user base. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And, there's this huge, what's safe, what's not kind of thing going on with the changes they've secretly made to their terms of service over the last year. So it has me concerned about games that just recently came out or are about to come out. Like Sea of Stars is a great example. Unity made this announcement 2 weeks after Sea of Stars came out. Sea of Stars was made with Unity.
Right.
They've got a DLC coming out next year. So it took them 5 years to develop this game. When they jumped into this contract with Unity, the terms were, we won't screw you, right?
Yeah.
That's basically what it comes down to. And if we change the terms of service and you don't like it, you can keep your old terms of service for, as long as you don't update to a newer version.
Right.
And the question is, are you now on the hook for this thing if you updated after they removed those terms without letting people know that they removed those terms?
From the document that I read, a lawyer's hot take on it basically was the overarching terms that are beyond what was in their GitHub repo basically say we can change this at any time. Without notice, in fact. And now in fact, I read a hot take from one of the company's, representatives that said, we're giving you 3 months notice. Well, whoop-de-doo.
But they gave zero notice on the fact that you can maintain old terms of service.
Right.
Like they just secretly deleted that whole chunk of
it just went away.
Their TOS. Like didn't let anybody know. It just kind of one day gone. So it happened sometime between June 2022 and now, right?
Yep.
But clearly it was at least over a month ago. That's what we know. So like that's really fucking sketchy. That shows that they're like trying to pull one over on their user base, the people who pay them money.
Yeah.
And there are arguments now, don't take what we're saying with any sort of legal stance because we're not lawyers.
Right.
And even the lawyers are like, get yourself a lawyer. Don't take this as legal advice. But it seems like the way they're handling this will backfire on them for the most part. As long as you meet certain criteria, you are probably not on the hook for these funds.
I hope so.
Now,
I hope so.
Yeah, me too.
The thing is, like, I don't think any one studio by itself is going to be able to take on Unity. I think it's going to result in a class action.
Yeah. And there's talks.
And the thing is, like, there's a really big reality here that, when studios chose Unity, they chose it with these financial terms in place, right?
Yeah.
And they had these financial terms been what they are now, or they had real notice of these terms changing in the future to something like this, they would have been like, whoa, 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 no, we're not going with that. We're going to go with something else, because this is just a massive change. Realistically, when you enter a contract with something and they're like, well, we have the right to change fees, you're thinking, okay, they're charging this much for the subscription. Later, they might charge this much. It'll go up.
Right.
Okay, that's fair. That's reasonable. That's understandable. But new junk fees out of nowhere that are charged in a way that nobody has. Like, it doesn't make sense. And it's too uncontrollable. It's too volatile.
Right.
So
and
it's interesting to me is that before Unity became the indie darling that it was for people to use, a lot of people were doing their own in-house engines, or they're using one of various different frameworks. There's definitely a variety of frameworks when mobile was first taking off. And then Unity kind of gave you a platform that was just easy to get into and use. So a lot of people start taking advantage of that. What all this has done, they might get some money out of the big success stories who use Unity, but going forward, a lot of people I think are going to abandon the platform. It's going to take them several years to train up and learn skills in other platforms. But I think what we're going to see 2-3 years from now is we're going to see a lot of smaller studios or indie developers shift from Unity and maybe not even go to Unreal, but rather go to something they've made in-house themselves. Or they're going to look at, or somebody's going to come out with an open
source.
Well,
framework.
Godot is open.
Godot is open source.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see a dozen or so different game frameworks in the next couple of years because of what Unity has done today. And I think people are going to be like more aware of not putting all of their eggs in a basket like Unity, because this could happen with many other companies you may have an agreement with. You never know. It's the risk of free stuff.
So I want to talk about, because I'm a software developer, right? I write code all day, every day. And a lot of talk has been, oh, well, we're going to see this game drop and go over to, Epic, or we're going to see this game drop and go over to Godot, or we're going to see this game drop and go over to whatever. And as a developer, an example is if you're familiar with Amazon Web Services, I write code that interacts with Amazon Web Services. I use Amazon Web Services libraries to write much of my code. And they switched from V1 of their libraries to V2, and there were substantial changes, and most of them were for the better. But they basically said, V1's going to work for in perpetuity. We're just going to basically keep those hooks there. But all the new features that you may want are going to be in V2. But I remember it took us, we're still shifting things to V2, and I've been doing this for 2 years, right? And so this isn't something that you're like, well, I'm just going to go rip all of my assets out of Unity and I'm going to go plug them into Unreal, right? This is
right. It's not Lego.
No, no, this is an entire shift in coding and methodology of hooks, APIs, etc. So
yeah, well, and to a degree that's true, but there's also the aspect of when it comes to the hard code, at least a lot of that transfers over to other things, because Unity is really C# based.
Okay.
And so if C# is your bread and butter, that's where most of your stuff. If you switch to Godot, Godot supports it. If you switch to Unreal supports it. So
Sure.
at least there's that level of, we can transfer a lot of stuff and we'll have to fix a few things, figure out how to do this particular stuff over here. But
yeah,
a great example of this
internal
is Among Us.
Internal functionality will probably stay relatively the same. It's the hooks into the engine.
Unity offers you.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. And so Among Us is a really good example. They're going to be switching engines, which, that's the only company that's like a game on the market that they're like, you gotta give us some time. We're swapping engines.
Yeah. Yeah.
We know a lot of people, we know other studios can't really do this. We're at a place where we can. So give us a window of time for not pushing out updates while we make this change. Yeah. And then the game will be up and running again, like before, just in a new engine, and then we'll continue updates again. So it's, on the surface, Among Us is a very simplistic game. I don't think it'll take them too long to transfer it to another engine. But then, if you look at let's look at Sea of Stars again. There's a lot going on in this game.
Sure.
There's the lighting elements that are like really strange for a 2D game. There's the just the way the combat works, the various map style modes and special effects they put into it. This is not going to swap engines. Like there's no way Sabotage can do that.
Right.
It's unrealistic.
Yeah.
So for them, chances are after this game, they're just going to jump ship on Unity because, and the Sabotage has not said one word about this one way or the other. I keep checking because I'm kind of curious about them specifically.
I think they're the only ones.
Release,
I think they're the only ones.
Well, I wonder what Valheim is going to do, because Valheim is on Unity, and they are also like, I mean, they're in early access. They'll probably be in early access for another couple of years, but they're notoriously slow, I guess, on development because they purposely kept their team very, very small. It's still, I think, under 10 people, and they're on Unity. So what do they do? Do they stop development and try and switch to a different engine? It doesn't make sense for Valheim. That game is just too busy for, like, it's just too much to switch it over. Do they stop the game now and start over from scratch? That doesn't make sense either for something that sold so well.
Yeah. But then there's also there's an element of data privacy breaches with these new terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of people making the argument that this new per install fee violates European GDPR laws.
It probably does.
And so now how do you enforce that with, people who are in various countries in Europe using Unity? Because local law supersedes whatever's in the contract if the contract is up against it, which is kind of the case a lot of times. Like you'll see a lot. It doesn't stop corporations and companies from putting things in the contract to sort of scare the uneducated. A really good example of this is, in the United States, a lot of times your terms of employment are you can't talk about your, what you make with other employees.
Even though that's against the law. That's against the law.
Yeah. Like that's unenforceable. If someone fires you for talking about what you make to other employees,
right,
you can sue the shit out of your company for firing you because that's wrongful termination. Because in the United States, it's totally legal to do.
It's protected.
Illegal to require. It's protected. So there's a lot of things in these terms that are very focused on probably just the United States and didn't take other countries into consideration.
I actually have a quote. I have a quote from a spokesperson that talked to Ars Technica.
Okay.
And the quote is, "Our terms of service provide that Unity may add or change fees at any time. We are providing more than 3 months advance notice of the Unity runtime fee before it goes into effect. Consent is not required for additional fees to take effect, and the only version of our terms is the current version. You simply cannot choose to comply with a prior version," which that goes back on something they've done. But it's the last line is the important to what we're talking about right now. "Further, our terms are governed by California law, notwithstanding the country of the customer." So basically, they probably will cave in the EU where there's GDPR, right? They probably will cave.
Well, it's interesting that they're like, "Oh yeah, our terms are within California law." Well, California is a notoriously, consumer friendly jurisdiction, as well as, just consumer employee. Well, there's two types of consumers here that are kind of in a gray area that's not great. You've got the people making the games, they are consumers for Unity, and then the consumers of those games.
Right.
So you've got two tiers of consumers who are unhappy with this. It's invasive. It's easily stated to be unfair. I hate using the term unfair, but really it is because of how easy a company can be install bombed, right?
Well, in fairness, fairness. You unfair is in the terms of, human to human interaction. It's a concept, right? But there are legal guidelines. There is wording of fairness in many legal guidelines, right? Like undue burden, right? That's an unfair, and so fairness is in the legal context. So I think applying fair or unfair is actually correct here.
But I mean, this seems like something that a lot of companies will band together, because I'm sure there are a number of developers that are based in California that are affected by this. And then you've got the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which I think they're
Yeah.
also based in California. And it's pretty easy to see the EFF jumping in on this and being like, yeah, we'll help because this is BS.
Yeah.
So it's Unity versus one developer. Yeah, Unity's going to win. But when you put a class action backed by the Electronics Frontier Foundation, it's a lot shakier for Unity, right? It's this is a weird mess they've put themselves in. And I don't know, maybe the idea was to sell high before all this happened, ground the valuation of Unity into nothing, and then try to buy it up cheap and fix it. But
Right.
is there really fixing this at this point?
Well, or the other side of it, because I mean, there's the stock, version of pump and dump, right? And then, but there's also, they gave 3 months of notice. No game is going to get off the platform in 3 months. Like
No.
I argue, I mean, I'm not going to bet my house on it, but I argue no game is going to get off the platform before January 1.
Mm-mm.
And so they're going to collect a whole bunch of royalties right out of the starting gate. And so I kind of have wondered if maybe it's a profitability pump and dump kind of situation, right? Where they're just going to, hey, we got our profit and now I'm going to sell my shares and walk away. See you Unity, I'm off the board. I made my money.
Yeah, maybe.
Possibly, but the people who, I mean, I know there was widely reported that, Rocketello and a few other people sold shares, but they didn't sell all their shares. It was a fraction of what they had. People got to keep that in mind as well. It is interesting. Like, do you tank your company so it can be bought out by somebody else that you have a deal with? Maybe. But then what's the point when any value in Unity is basically gone at this point as a brand? Nobody's going to want to use this going forward. If you're a small developer and you see Unity, you'd be insane to not use something like Unreal or Godot or do it in-house at this point. Like, it's crazy.
Really quick, I want to clarify something because I don't want us to get into legal trouble. I said royalties. It is a runtime fee. It is different than a royalty. So, yeah, to be clear, I'm sorry, runtime fee.
To be fair, a royalty of 20 cents per unit, I don't think people would be up in arms like this. They'd be like, well, this fucking sucks. But, I mean, it's still cheaper than the 5% that Unreal is charging. So, okay, fine.
Yeah.
That would make sense. But per install, a runtime fee is really bizarre.
Yeah.
And I think they did this because they probably were like, well, there's no legal precedent for this. So, yeah, we should be able to get away with this and it won't be a problem.
Yeah, what the hell's a runtime fee?
Maybe legally, given that they secretly deleted aspects of their terms of service months ago, maybe legally they'll be able to be on the right side of this. But morally, ethically, they're going to lose hard. Like, at this point, any games that are under a year into development with Unity are going to be like, yeah, we're out. We're not doing that. And even I've seen some that are 2 years in that they're like, we're going to have to swap now.
Yeah.
Well, and it's going to put us back maybe a year, but
I think either as importantly or maybe even more importantly, no new developer's going to go look at Unity anymore.
No.
Like, they have basically killed any future development, right? I mean, other than what's already in process and people are like, it's too late. We might as well go.
And the wild thing is, like, I've had an itch to make games for ages. I've never legitimately made one, but I have a couple ideas for them. And I think I know the one I want to start with, and I'm not going to give it out here because I don't want somebody else to run with it. It's my idea. I'm keeping it. But
how dare,
after playing Sea of Stars and seeing what Unity was capable of, I was like, all right, I might jump into this with Unity. Yeah. And then they made this announcement. I was like, oh, no. Like, I guess I'm going to look elsewhere and see what else.
Unity was cool because it's a 3D engine, which and when it first came out, it was a 3D engine that was accessible when most engines were 2D. But it's a 3D engine that there is definitely there's a lot of it has an asset store, and there is several great 2D assets on Unity that you can use to make 2D games, but still take advantage of 3D lighting and shading and shadows that you saw in something like Sea of Stars. That's why it's really cool. There's a lot of benefits there. it's a good engine, and it's so unfortunate that they're doing this
Well,
to what is like a decent piece of software.
and to Wolf's point, I've had an idea as well. I'm not giving it out here because it's mine also. But I've had an idea to, for a game, and I've shopped around for an engine. And funny enough, this actually drove me to go get on Humble Bundle. There's a Learning Godot bundle right now, and I went and picked it up. Like, and maybe that'll be enough drive for me. Hey, maybe once again, Unity may have unified people.
Yeah.
See, when I was looking at PlayStation games recently for one of our other episodes at Press B, and I saw was it Jazz Jackrabbit, I think it was, and it gave me some nostalgia for like that early 3D gameplay. So I have an idea for a game, and I'm going to say it because I'm not an asshole. So this is a free one to the internet to run with it. The idea is you take this low poly 3D clown, and he swings on these trapeze in a 3D environment through hoops of fire. I think it'd kill, and you can just call it Circus Charlie 3D. And maybe you can call it Doink. I don't know if Doink is taken already. Maybe you can use that name, but no, like Unity is great, and
I think
it's a
Circus
great
Charlie's
engine,
taken.
and
You might need to go with Carnival Chuck.
Carnival Chuck.
I want to point out, though, folks, don't trust Jake. In 5 years, he will be charging a runtime fee on his idea.
Yeah. I'm going to corner the market on clown-based games in 2024.
Well, yeah, I think, as I said at the beginning, I feel this feels so Wizards of the Coast, D&D, their D20 license,
OGL.
right? Their OGL. It feels so similar, and I really feel like Wizards did earn back a lot of the trust when they went back and they said, okay, you know what, we're going to work with the community. We're going to actually do, we're going to open this up. I still think they hurt themselves, but I think that they walked a lot of it back in a good way. And I don't know that Unity is completely lost. They still have the time right now to walk it back. We have 3 months, but honestly, I think I don't think they are going to. And B, like, that clock is actually really short. It's not 3 months. It's like a week from now, right? So.
Yeah, theoretically, yes, there's still the time to walk it back and make the change and recover a lot of the goodwill they've generated over the years, because no studio is going to be able to just completely swap out of Unity within 3 months, let alone, a week or two. It's not doable. Most games take, even little games can take a year to develop. So major studios, they're spending 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 years developing these, or one person developing a game long term can take 5 years, right? So these are things that 3 months may seem like a long time when you're looking at just financials, but when you're looking at like development cycles, it is not. It's a drop in the bucket.
No, I have quarterly goals, and every time I run to the end of my quarter, I'm like, oh crap. I felt so good going in, Yeah.
But they realistically, they probably have time to earn some goodwill back, but I really think they've burned a lot of bridges, and their company is really going to have to downsize soon. Like they're going to lose a lot of income on this. They think they're going to make a lot of income. I don't think they're going to make as much as they're going to lose, honestly. Sure. And it's not just that, but like what, last year they lost $900 million.
Wow.
Like,
I mean, this makes sense.
That's a weird thing to me, is Unity lost $900 million. So they spent $900 million more than they made. Like, right. That's wild. But if you look at some things, they're paying executives 10, 20, 30, sometimes upwards of $40 million a year. Just, there were like 6 or 7 people you can see online that between 2020 and 2022, they paid $150 million. Like, that's probably not necessary. And there's something behind the scenes here that feels super shady
Yeah.
and super like the people at the top are just tanking Unity to line their own pockets,
And
which is a really weird concept to me, but
they could be burning it to sell it, right? I mean, there are plenty of cases where you burn it down so that you get an offer and you get out, right? I mean,
right.
fire
But
sale
I
it,
mean,
right?
at this point, buying Unity does not seem like a great idea, you
No.
know? But
And
then we look at it, but then you consider the Microsoft Activision Blizzard purchase,
yeah,
and it's like everybody's like, yeah, let Microsoft buy Activision Blizzard because Activision Blizzard right now is a shit show.
right,
At least Microsoft will put new leadership in there and clean it up, and it
right.
won't be the same toxic mess it is right now. Might be the case with Unity, especially when you consider like what the bomb threat that happened, and
Yes.
like not condoning this by any means, but there was a bomb threat at their or death threats at their corporate offices.
Yeah.
And then it
Yeah.
was come to light that it was an employee. It was coming from inside the building. So
Inside
like
job.
even their employees are that mad about this, right?
Yeah.
Because employees are like, you're screwing our like we're
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
be jobless because of you. Like that's where the state of this is right now.
Coming back really quick, one final comment I have on the earning back goodwill, because as I said, Wizards has done a decent job of earning a lot of it back, but I think the hardest thing for Unity is the fact that they used to have a license that says, oh, if you don't like the new license, just don't update your tools and don't release on the new platform, and you can use the old TOS. Doing away with that, I think I was thinking about this. I actually think that kind of ruins a lot of their ability to earn back goodwill. I think doing that piece alone basically said, because Wizards didn't do that, right? They didn't go back and say, this is a nice contract you have here. It'd suck if something happened to it, right? They basically changed. They basically changed the one OGL. They added a new one instead of going and removing all the old ones.
Yeah.
And so the problem with earning trust back is like their trust me bro is gone. Like they just basically threw all their trust me bro away. So, yeah.
And that's what they'll have to do. Like, because that's exactly what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to say, look, we are changing that one piece in terms of user service. If you want to use our new version of Unity in 2024, this is the requirements. These are the financial fees. If you're going to stick with the old version, then you can keep doing that. Because considering the money, the time, and the sweat to change engines, it's just not realistic for developers. So if Unity can give them that peace of mind, saying, you know what, fine, stay on that version. You can do what you want to do in that version. But if you decide to move forward into a newer version, here's the world of that. But I still think even if they were to do that piece, they're still going to lose a lot of business from a lot of developers who are going to want to switch when they're able to another engine. But it is a lot of work to do so.
Yep.
So this is it's a weird position they put themselves in. And even if Unity gets bought by another company, that there's just a sourness, I'm sure, in a lot of people's mouths now. Like, I'm never going to touch Unity again after I don't have to anymore, right? That's probably going to be the case with a ton of people. And this is like for people going forward who want to develop games and haven't yet. They're going to be like, well, that's one less option on the table for me.
Right.
Right.
Like on the whiteboard, it now has a big red X, right?
Yeah. And it's like, well, now my choices are over here instead of that one too. My options are a little slimmer. It'll be a little easier to decide on an engine now.
Yep. Well, I think my thought on this is to paraphrase a Key and Peele, you done fucked up, Riccatello.
How to take your company in a tweet is basically what the lesson is from this.
Yeah. All right. What other thoughts do we have? Are we good at this point?
I think that's kind of about it. I just wonder, anybody watching, what's your position in the industry?
Please.
Are you a gamer? Are you a developer? Are you, wanting to develop and haven't yet? Well, how does this color your opinion on engines as a whole? Because there is some, I think, discussion now, given the terms here, as to whether, using a third-party engine is worth it at this point. Like, if they're
Yeah.
gonna just up and change fees on you
Right.
at any time, do you give them that authority, or do you start developing your own in-house? Are developers gonna come together and build their own open source engine? Are they gonna invest heavily into Godot to help Godot take off and become a major engine that's open source? What's gonna happen here as, as an end user here for you guys watching the video? Where do you stand on this? How do you think that'll play out? I'm very curious to see what other people have to say.
Yep. And either leave comments or we have a Discord, come discuss there. Recipetocancel.com has all of our links. Once again, I'm a shill. Subscribe if you like our YouTube channel.
Please.
We're shilling for subscriptions.
Yeah, this is a bit of an unusual episode. We don't usually do a news thing like this. So this isn't really an episode of the podcast so much
Right.
as just an impromptu news thing. But it's kind of something we've been considering in the background anyway, is doing news stuff. So let us know if you like this.
And
Yeah.
also, this is something where we are big fans of indie games on the podcast. We love these things.
Mhm.
And something like this is such a radical hit to indie developers. So we had to talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
This is a huge event, unfortunately. That's so unfortunate.
I went and looked at all of the responses from the developers, right? And we talked about some of them: Rust, Phasmo, Subnautica, and I looked at the list and I'm like, I have bought so many of those games. Yeah, so it's a popular platform, and they've basically tanked it. So, all right,
Yeah.
well, cool. Well, I'm good. Any other thoughts?
Good.
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, it's been good talking with you guys, and cheers, everybody.
Yeah. Have a good
Yes.
one, folks.